Matthew Rhys, good to see you again. The Americans, when you go back to shoot this time, I don't know if it's sunk in yet, but this is going to be the final time that you return, go into pre-production, get a season ready to go. What are your thoughts about that as you finalize this program and this character?
I yes, it's very much been sinking in for a while now that I think it's going to be this very bittersweet experience of having embarked on a very long journey with this character, this cast, these writers, these people, and every cliche is true. You do become a family, you become very close. However, the flip side is I'm very glad that we're finishing. Being told as a production that you have 2 years to finish out, I think is an incredible luxury, especially for the writers to write to that end very specifically and very strongly. And I think that will serve us incredibly well. And the hope is, we give the audience, the ending they've deserved, that those who have stuck with us.
We've seen in television, especially the past few years, when shows know this and know that they're ending on a specific date and time, let's say The Sopranos or Breaking Bad. I mean, it really gives license to the producers, your showrunners. Anything could happen to anybody at any moment.
Yeah, I think, I learned that lesson very early on, that anyone is expendable in television, and more so sometimes the more dramatic, the greater the spike in ratings. So you understand it's a beast in that respect. But I think everyone's fully aware that, there is that to television these days whereby, you can be gone in 60 seconds.
What, as you go into a season, how much do they tell you about a particular season? Are you aware of all the twists and turns, or do you find out a lot week to week as you get the scripts?
No, yeah. So I'm sorry. Yes, more so in the Americans. I think out of our own choosing, coupled with the fact that I have a mouth like a motor, that I can't help but tell everyone exactly what's happening. Probably to protect themselves, they tell me less and less. But it's far more interesting that way. They give you a very broad outline of the season, and they're very amenable if you want to know the greater detail. But I enjoy, week to week reading and discovering what it is that's happening, and as close to an audience reaction as possible.
You directed another episode this season. Is that particularly daunting on you, because you're also one of the leads? As you, I guess when you're directing, it's more about the prep the week or two before. Is that correct?
Yes, very much so. And I think the final, they've been incredibly kind to me, the Americans. They've always given me the episode coming out of Christmas, so they give me those 2 weeks to prepare. And this year they give me a far earlier episode so that I can prep before we start shooting. So as you say, the preparation is the greater part of it. Double duty I don't do well with. I'd far rather concentrate on one, but I enjoy both in equal measure. And this is an incredible TV show to have the opportunity to direct. So I'm happy to do it, because it's, believe me, it's very brief. We shoot an episode in about 7 days, so it's gone before you turn around.
When you finish The Americans, is that a focus of your career? Do you feel like something you want to direct more, or are you looking for another television project, or have you thought that far ahead yet?
I haven't thought that far ahead. To be perfectly honest, I'd love to go back to theatre, because that's been a very long time since I've done that. But yes, the directing is definitely an avenue and an area I'd like to follow, a little more intently.
Speaking of theater, I wanted to bring up 3 or 4 people that you work with regularly. One, I guess, who has, at least the character seems to have left the show. Frank Langella is just one of the kings of theater. We also, of course, know him from movies and your show and a lot of television, but won a ton of Tony Awards. What's it like acting opposite somebody like that you probably admire as much as anybody?
It's a number of things. It's like, Frank's like the silverback. He's the sort of, the alpha male of what he does. And you're saying, as you say, you're very right in saying that I was a great admirer of his work. And therefore, it brings a kind of it brings not just reverence, but it, it ups your game in a way, because do well by him, you equally in a terrible way kind of want to impress him. So it's like, I always adhere to the age-old adage of tennis that, if you get a good tennis partner, it'll up your game. So having someone like him walk on set certainly upped my game and terrified me in equal measure.
The episode you've submitted for the Emmy voters to watch is called Crossbreed, and that's the one where you and Elizabeth take your daughter Paige over to meet Frank Langella for the first time, because he's leaving the country, he's leaving his job. What did you like most about that particular episode?
Actually, honest. The producers very kindly said, look, you tell us which of the 13 episodes you'd like us to submit. And then you sit down and you kind of work your way into a quiet frenzy where you go, well, I can't submit any of them. I was terrible in most. So it finally came down to me saying to the producers, I would rather if you chose the episode for me, which they very kindly did.
What about this one, though, as you shot it?
I think to try and look at your work objectively is...
We had a little bit of a delay there. I was just going to say, what about that particular episode, though, as forgetting the Emmy part of it, did you enjoy shooting? Because that has some really quiet moments, a big moment of discovery for you as you find out more about your father.
Yes, you sort of nailed it, really. It was that, I think, the more of these kind of personal revelations these characters go through, the more human they become. And I think that's been a very important, especially for me, path for them to take, that they're not these kind of Jason Bournes. They're incredibly real, fleshed out 3D infallible people who have equal power problem and spy missions to do. So the more we kind of learn of very universal but afflictions, characteristics, it always makes me much happier. But also the meeting of our daughter with Frank Langella was a scene that I loved.
Speaking of Paige, Holly Taylor, we interviewed her a few weeks ago. Do you and Keri feel quite protective and maybe even a little bit paternal towards Holly and Kedrick?
Of course, and it's been, it's been my first experience of watching these true children grow into young adults, and I know I sound like not just my father, but so many cliches, but it's sort of true, and I've never experienced that. And yes, you do become very protective and paternal of them, and especially in this business, that you can see how predatory it can be on some levels, and you kind of, but they've both got good heads on their shoulders and good parents behind them. So I'm not too worried. But yes, your protective nature certainly kicks in.
Another episode from this season I wanted to ask about, it's the one Keri has submitted for the Emmy voters, but it was probably the most explosive episode of the season, where you and she have the assignment of going to meet with the, I forget the character's name, but the older lady about her Nazi past and assisting the Nazis. Can you just talk a little bit about that episode and what that meant to you and Keri in shooting that one?
Yeah, it was, I do love it when they're kind of brave in these decisions sometimes with these episodes. We saw a similar one, I think last season or season before, whereby it's all about this moment in a room between three people. There's no explosions, there's no big gunfights. It's three people talking with great revelation and emotion and dramaturgy, and for me, that's where the real fireworks lay. And that was just a great stake to get your teeth into.
But again, we see Philip, as we've seen in many moments over the past few seasons, where his heart isn't in this nearly as much as it maybe was earlier in his life, and he can't pull the trigger, and it's up to Elizabeth to pull the trigger on this couple.
Yes, literally. But to me, that's great drama. You have you have these inbuilt conflicts which manifest themselves in the moment in different ways, and as a relationship, as a professional couple, as an intelligence officer, as a human being. There's so many elements, you know, as a husband and wife, as real husband and wife. There's so many elements in conflict. It just makes for great drama. If it was easy for us both to pull the trigger, then.
And you've worked with Joel and Joe all the years. Do they welcome suggestions from you, or do they just say let us do our job and you do your job? What's that relationship like working with them?
They're incredibly open to our suggestions. My suggestions tend to be sort of terrible, so they sit there very kindly nodding and say, "Oh yes, that's interesting," and then, you know, once I'm out of the room, they ignore them. Really, but yes, I'm sort of still trapped in the mind of a 13-year-old boy who grew up watching the A-Team. So my suggestions tend to be a very similar theme to those episodes of B.A. Baracus and Hannibal Lecter.
Another person you've gotten to work with over the years, another theater veteran, Margot Martindale. What's that like? We love Margot here. We talk to her every year. So what is your relationship like with her?
Difficult, I would say. And the difficulty lies in not laughing when you're acting with Margot Martindale, because she's one of those rare talents that, you know, can perform. The great performances are kind of given now, but she has a great ability just in the minuscule dot of pupil corner center of her eye to give you that twinkle to kind of let you know that she's on the cusp of laughing or possibly laughing at you. Regardless, it always makes you laugh. So I find it incredibly hard working with her for the sheer fact that we're always suppressing laughter.
Well, I'm going to tie all this together with your other show. The previous season, you got to work with another great actor, Dylan Baker, whose wife is Becky Ann Baker, who also is an Emmy nominee for Girls, like you are. I loved this episode. It's basically a little mini play. I mean, it's just the two of you for 90% of the episode. How did that come to you?
Rather terrifyingly, to be perfectly honest. Our script supervisor on Americans, Kim DeLeese, is also the script supervisor on Girls. And I think when they were casting the Girls episode, you know, Kim was involved, and she told Jenny Connor and Lena Dunham, she went, "Oh, Matthew Rhys would be perfect for this kind of slightly seedy sexual predator," which worried me enormously.
So Lena didn't write this specifically for you, but they felt like you were the perfect person to play the character.
Sadly, yes. Also, I know Jenny Connor's been very kind about our show in her writing, and she's written about us, and I know she was a fan of the Americans, or follow the Americans. So I think that helped. And the rest was invitation and acceptance.
This guy that you play, Chuck, I still don't have a finger on the pulse of who this guy is. What he could charm his way into any conversation, anybody's life, can't he? He knows how to use the words.
He does, and you know that's the thing about writers. They're eloquent. They sometimes have a great understanding of the social psyche, the human psyche. Therefore, they're communicators. They're eloquent, and they have vocabulary, not just in word, but in emotion. And they at times can use that to the greater good.
And Lena Dunham, acting opposite her, she also wrote the episode. What was that like?
Sort of fantastic. I mean, you're always terrified. Well, not terrified, but you're always a little nervous. I think when you're acting with the writer, that the concern is that they'll be very precious about their writing, and she wasn't. She's very open to kind of improvisation and opening up the piece as you see fit. Fantastic in that versatile way of going, how do you best make this better?
You're in the guest acting category for Girls. That is some kind of group there, the six of you. I don't think there's no place on earth that the six of you, Tom Hanks, Lin-Manuel Miranda, Dave Chappelle, Matthew Rhys, Riz Ahmed, Hugh Laurie, that group of six is quite fascinating.
I've sent out invitations that I would like to sit down with that six for a dinner, because I think, seeing as we're only, I think it would make one hell of a dinner party, and should possibly be televised.
That would be. You know, I've heard of that over the years with different groups. Maybe at the Oscars, the 5 supporting actor nominees will get together, and maybe the person that has won the most awards, let's say Tom Hanks in this case, would pay for the dinner. So I'm just throwing that out there. If you need somebody to come and like transcribe what all is said, I'll be glad to join that group.
Great. I'll let you, if they accept the invitation, I'll let you know.
And your group in the drama actor category is also fascinating, because you've got Oscar winners like Kevin Spacey and Anthony Hopkins. You've got a comedian who turned into a dramatic actor like Bob Odenkirk. It's a really a Tony winner, Liev Schreiber. It's another fun group.
So they're punchy groups. Yeah, I mean, I worked with Anthony about 18, 19 years ago. We made a feature film together, Julie Taymor's first feature film. So I'm looking forward just purely to saying hello to him again, because was a childhood hero of mine, continues to be. And then Bob Odenkirk and I were making a movie together this summer, when on the day we heard about the Emmy nominations. Ironically, it was also with Tom Hanks. I enjoyed the kind of, especially the ribbing of Bob Odenkirk as we pretended like we were in Rocky and faced off against each other several times.
Well, I was going to ask about that movie. I know you can't say much, but it's one of the movies I'm most looking forward to this year, mainly because I've been a Steven Spielberg nerd since I was a little kid and saw Jaws way too early. Way too young to see Jaws. But now that you've worked with him, you know, worked on a movie that has Tom Hanks, Meryl Streep, I mean, that's amazing.
To work with those 3 people, and you spend the first days, many days of filming, kind of getting over the nerves of shooting with Spielberg, because when he shouts action, you kind of you don't just start acting, you're sort of trying to get over this tsunami of nerves that are crashing into you. So it was a number of experiences rolled into one.
I got one other question to ask you about. This goes back also to my youth, but I was watching this not too long ago. I think my favorite TV character of all time was Columbo. And you got to be in, I think, either the next to last or third from last, Columbo at a very young age. You played a pretty snarky character on there. Can you just describe what it was like working with Peter Falk?
And, you know, I've been incredibly, I hate using the word, but blessed in the people that I've worked with. And I was fortunate to work with him on a BBC A&E co-production. And he, look, I'm going to do another Columbo. And it was his last. It actually turned out to be his last. And he said, I'd love you to come and play the bad guy. And I said, and in my mind, I just thought, we were in New Zealand at the time. And I thought, that'll never happen. And he, true to his word, he got me a visa. He flew me over. And he picked me up from LAX himself. And I'll never forget, you know, this was someone I'd watched from, you know, the Cassavetes movies and all the way through. And such a master of his art and his technique. It was another life experience.
I saw Alan Arkin on an interview. Of course, they did the In-Laws together. He said, and they were great friends. He said he had never been around an actor that was more obsessive, like off in a corner, going over every little movement of his eye, his mouth. Did you find that to be the case as well?
Absolutely. We rehearsed for about 2 weeks before we shot the Columbo, which is unheard of in television. And that kind of dedication I've only seen in Sally Fields, to be perfectly honest, since that he was a true workaholic in that sense, and really strove for perfection.
Well, Matthew, many people on our website, Gold Derby, have been following you for so long. and are just thrilled that you've got both of these Emmy nominations this year. I hope we get to see you at both ceremonies.
I hope so too. I'll try to stay sober this time.
Thank you so much.